So I know I've done this video before, and there's a lot of other best beginner kill team videos out there, but this name has changed a lot since it's been released. So I think a lot of those videos, including mine, aren't really relevant anymore, to be honest. A lot of teams that used to be recommended have been replaced, and everybody knows the game better, so it's a lot easier to make good recommendations. So I'm going to have 4 criteria that I'm going to be looking at to help make recommendations. Number 1 is going to be price. These teams have to be $70 or lower. So I know not everyone is price sensitive, but normally for a new hobby, you don't want to spend that much money to get started. Number 2 is that the team isn't overly complicated. So they're simple, or at least have a simple way to play them. Like, there's a new Harlequin team, and I think it has like 2 mini games inside of the team, so we're trying to avoid stuff like that. Number 3 is the team is at least decent to play. So we're not looking for God tier necessarily, we're just trying to avoid garbage tier. So there are some teams that they're cheap and they're simple, but they're just bad. Even if you got good with the team, you'd have a hard time winning. And you don't want that if it's your first and only kill team. And number 4 is that the team won't be replaced. There are some teams that have come out that have replaced older teams and use a different combination of models, which means you have to go buy more to keep playing that fashion. So we're going to try to avoid that. If I recommend something that might be replaced, I want to make sure it at least is going to use the same models. And a nice bonus here, I wasn't actually planning this when I was writing out the teams I was recommending, but every team is just going to be one set. So you buy one thing, and that's your whole kill team. That's all you have to buy. And also, these aren't in any particular order. So for our first team is going to be an all Custode Talon of the Emperor team. So this is the team that Henry Cavill plays in 40k, and we should all strive to be a little more like the God Emperor of Nerdkind himself, and this hits you a little bit closer.
Warhammer 40,000. That is my jam. I have been into it since I was 10.
What's your army at the moment?
Custodes.
So I'm personally not ashamed of my man crush I have here. But seriously, this team's pretty solid, and they're pretty easy to play. The only special rules you really need to know is they have a Storm Shield, which is an invul save, and give you an extra parry bonus in melee. And you have an ability which ignores stuff like APL reduction, stun, and injured. So it's literally a rule to ignore rules, which makes them even easier to play. Plus, because you only have a couple models on the field, they're a lot easier to micromanage. You won't be overwhelmed by so much stuff going on. And they're tanky, so they're forgiving if you do mess up. Like, even if you leave one out in the open, just don't roll ones and they'll probably be okay. So the main negative to this team is you don't have very many models, and elite teams are kind of struggling in the meta right now, so they're not going to be absolute top tier. But you could mess that up by adding a Sisters of Silence team later if you want to spend more money. Those two can work together. And then you have more models on the board, and the only thing you have to worry about is they have some anti-psyker stuff, but it's nothing you really need to actively do. So one caveat to this is the team was in the compendium, which means I think it will be replaced at some point. But Sisters of Silence and Custodes both don't really have other models that would work in Kill Team. So I think it will be the same models, just the rules will get updated. I don't think it will be anything complicated. You should be fine if you buy this team. So our next team will be the Veteran Guardsmen. So this is a Kill Team specific set you can buy. And they'll look like the Deathcore Krieg, which are just awesome looking models. So I just recently read Dead Men Walking, which is a Necron against Krieg book. And that got me really hyped about Krieg, so I'm really liking these minis right now. So unlike the Custodes, these have a lot of specialty units. So every model kind of does something unique. But they shouldn't be too tough to learn. Most of the combos and synergies are pretty self-explanatory. Like, keep a spotter near the sniper, keep your comms die with whoever's yelling out the orders. It should just make sense. It's kind of like World War I tactics. They're not hard to learn. And I'm assuming you're not going to a tournament for your first match or two. You're not going to be that competitive. So what I would do is build all the specialty models, like your medic and your sniper. And then whoever you're playing against, let them know that you're new, which is probably going to be one of your friends, they'll know that. And then just play them all as regular troopers, so nothing specialty. Learn the basic rules, and then start adding in your specialist, and get to do all the fun abilities that this team has. So you can slowly crank up the complexity as you play. So next up we have the Tau Pathfinder, which are like the fancier version of the Compendium Tau. So they're one of the best ranged teams in the game, but I will warn you, this is probably on the higher end of complexity for what I was willing to do for this video. The two main things you'll have to learn with Tau are your marker light abilities, which basically they're abilities that put marks on your opponent, and then they're easier to hit or you get some kind of special advantage against shooting at them. And they have drones, which have some more complicated rules, but neither one are bad. A nice thing with this is even though they're not that complicated, they do have a lot of cool combos and abilities they can do. So once you learn how to play this game, and you learn what all your specialists do, you have a lot of chances to do outplays and counter moves. So this team can really grow with you. So you can take them from a really simple just shooting gallery team to being able to do a lot of special stuff. So I think it'd be really fun to start and learn with this team. So there are two big negatives here. Number one, if you play Tau, you're a weeb. Just know that. And two, their melee is horrible. So this isn't uncommon. There's other teams like this, but you can't do anything in melee, really. You're only really a shooting team. So this means you don't want to be aggressive and move up the board. So this team won't teach you to be aggressive. There's a very particular playstyle that you'll want to use if you play Tau. Next up, we have the other half of the Altarius set, the Ork Commandos. So Orcs are my favorite faction, so a little bit of bias here. Well, it goes back and forth between them and Tyranids, but they're one of my favorites. So, like the other teams, each one is a specialist model, so that adds a little bit of complexity. But the Orcs aren't really tactical geniuses. There's not a lot of synergies you have to know. Like, quick commando lesson here. Put dynamite on your Breacher Boy, use something like the Comms Boy or the Leader to give him an APL. He busts through the wall, blows something up. That's as complex as you get. That's like Commando Strategy 101. Besides that combo, the main gimmick these guys have is you can basically keep them in conceal orders, move up the board, and then charge from concealment. So they're really easy to jump between cover and get up to your opponent and then attack. They're kind of like the anti-Tau, where they're not very good at range, but they're awesome in melee. So they also have a pretty particular playstyle. They have some shooting, like the Daka Boy and the Sniper, but they won't carry your team. You have to get up into melee. So if you were wanting a more shooting heavy or balanced team, they won't be awesome, but if you like how they look or like the idea of a mostly a sneaky melee team, they'll be a good one to start out with. And then we have the Grey Knights. So these are the all-psyker secretive Space Marine teams. So the only special thing you really need to know is that they have their psyker powers, but they're pretty easy to use. They're all just buffs to the Grey Knights. So there's nothing offensive you really do with them. You just make your model better. I know this team will most likely be upgraded and replaced at some point, but I don't think it really matters that much. Because they don't really have other models that can be used instead, unless they get entirely original kill team models. But in their kit, it comes with 4 extra models and weapons. So what you can do is build your team, and then leave those 4 extras unbuilt with all their extra weapons and stuff that comes in the set. And then, if they do change the rules and you want to use something different, just build it out of those 4 extra guys. And you should be okay no matter what they do with the team in the future. So Grey Knights are kind of a jack-of-all-trades team. They have pretty good shooting, they have pretty good melee, they have psyker abilities, and they're fairly tanky. So there's no part of the game you don't get to participate in. You can always do basically anything with them, so it's a good way to learn the game. Now, I want to speedrun an honorable mention here, and that will be either team from the Marok set, which will be Phobos Space Marines or Heretic Guard, should also be pretty good. I've skimmed through their rules, and they're pretty simple. they should both be pretty competitive. Just the only reason they're not included as a main focus in this video is they're not really out yet. Like, you can buy the entire set, but you can't buy the individual teams unless you go on eBay. So once they're out, they should be competitive, they should be simple, and in our price range, and obviously not getting replaced because they're brand new. So that would be a good choice too. So that wraps up my list. But disclaimer here, just because I didn't say something doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it, or doesn't mean you shouldn't start with it. It just might be a little more complicated, or a little bit pricey, or maybe getting replaced. Like Death Guard will probably get replaced at some point. And then Necrons are awesome, but they're really expensive. You have to buy multiple separate things. So they're both great, I just didn't mention them here. Because there's like one flaw that made me a little bit skeptical to actually recommend them. If there's a team you love, go for it. Because I might be totally wrong about what's being replaced anyways. And I will say, you'll have more fun playing a team that you really connect with and love. And you'll figure out the rules. If you really like them, you'll make it work. I'm sure you've seen that in other games before too. This video was more of a guide of some stuff to think about and a place to start if you're thinking about getting into the hobby. Just for the love of the God Emperor, do not pick the new Harlequin team as your first kill team. Just don't even think about it.